Good morning, everyone. Today is December 7th. This is our first day of being 10 years old at Koontz and Associates. So last night was our fun party and our kickoff to the next decade. So thank you for joining us. I am Joanne Koontz. I am here with our strategic partner, Whitney Harper, who is the CEO of Advos Legal, another business law firm that we do quite a bit of work with. And Whitney has provided several pieces of insight for us over the last year or so by joining us on the webinars. So today we wanted to talk to you about the importance of your corporate documents. And I feel like Jackie and I beat the drum with some frequency. And I thought if we had a fresh face, maybe like, you don't want to listen to mom. Maybe if I bring in good cop, bad cop, I'll bring in dad.
And mom or dad, then maybe it's Aunt Whitney.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're going to try to do. Right. So as always, these webinars are recorded and distributed on our YouTube channel, on our KoontzAssociates.com and KoontzParkin.com websites, and also on our Facebook pages. I'm certain you'll stumble onto Advos's website and find it as well. And if you have questions, you can feel free to use the Q&A bar at the bottom. You don't have to wait until we're done. You can fire those away as we're going so that we can make this as conversational as possible. Two lawyers are better than one when it comes to legalese. So if we hear your questions as we go, we can kind of keep everybody from falling out of algebra class and getting behind. So, so without further ado, I wanted to say thanks, Whitney, and let's see what you got planned.
Thrilled to be here. Happy 10 years. That's quite an accomplishment.
I can't even believe it. Like it feels like 5 minutes, not, I mean, sometimes it feels like 100 years.
5 very long minutes sometimes, right?
Especially early on, they were 5 very costly minutes, but like any business, you get your wheels under you and keep going. So it's been wonderful. My team is amazing, and that's how this has worked. We have a wonderful group of people, and it was funny because last night when we were toasting, Linda, Jackie, and Elizabeth were literally there from day one, and they're still here. Like we haven't lost any of these OGs at all. It's just been added to, and it's been really wonderful.
Tremendous. That's really
people are definitely the hard part of the business, so don't. There's a different webinar for that. But when you get great people, that's when the magic happens.
It's a true story. And really, I mean, what we're going to talk about today is some of the stuff that like helps a business go from, twinkle in your eye to 10-year overnight success in a way that is not like as stressful as sometimes it can be, in a way that is going to deliver you better value. All of those things, like these corporate documents that I think I said to my husband, like the topic of the webinar was corporate documents. He was like, snooze. But it's really like, as with every webinar I think we've ever done together, we're going to make this story time and have some fun with it, because that's why it matters, right? Is what happens if I get it wrong? What happens if I get it right? What's the benefit? And what does this all mean? So I figured we could just talk through today, kind of why this stuff is important, and then some of the things to look for as the owner of a business are kind of sitting at year end, looking at a fresh new calendar and thinking about what you can do to put yourself in the best footing possible, keep yourself out of the hot seat in the new year. So,
the problem I think with the corporate documents is it is something that is designed to sort of sit on the shelf. So because it's not in your face, it's important, but not urgent. So it's easy to, I'll do that later. I'll do that later. I'll do that later. And then there's a problem and it hasn't done. It's just like your estate planning documents. Like everyone has good intentions and then, and then they're not done.
Yeah. It is exactly that. It absolutely is. And one of the nice things about the end of the year and the start of the new year is it's a good, like, false sense of urgency, right? Like, it's a great way to trick yourself or those around you into, we need to do this because it's year end, or we need to do this so that we start the year off well. Because these are the things that are not ever urgent until they are like deadly, right? Yeah. So I absolutely encourage people to think about like putting together the checklist of my year-end cleanup, just like you might look at your financials as you're thinking about, you know, where did we land on the year? And I want to make sure that I've got my expenses in the right categories, or, you know, that we've captured the revenue we wanted to capture, whatever it is. You also want to think through, have we checked the boxes? Have we done the things that need doing on some really foundational pieces that if you get them right, you can, like the reward is you can let them sit on a shelf for a while, right? And do so with the comfort of knowing that when you need to pull them off the shelf, they're going to be ready for you to use. They're going to be appropriate. And they're actually going to help you through some of the toughest times in your business, because you won't have to make decisions at that point that are fraught and that are really kind of emotional, difficult to think through, very emotional. So do it now, put a stake in the ground, tell yourself, tell your business partners, your team that year end is when we're going to do it. We're going to have this done so that we can toast at the new year and know that it is behind us. And
frankly, it's a good time to pull it out because you may not even know when your annual meeting says it's going to be held.
Yes, yes,
so
exactly.
If you don't know, this is the perfect time to crack the book and have a look.
So when we talk about corporate documents, just so that we're all thinking about what that is, kind of in the same way, I think about it as the formation documents and then the governance documents around your business entity. That assumes that we have a business entity. So step one.
You're really at step one.
Yeah, right. Step one, let's make sure that we have a legit business entity. Often that is a like no-brainer. Yes, of course we have one. We've been paying taxes. We've been doing the thing. Like we have an EIN. We know that we've got that in place. Every so often, either because you've delegated it or you didn't delegate to someone else and you were forgetful about it, but every so often we have somebody who has a business entity, but that entity has, by this point in the year, been administratively dissolved by the good old state of Florida because we failed to file the annual report. So good first step, just get on Sunbiz, take a look and see what it says about your entity. Are you in good standing? Are you active? If you're not, if it's administratively dissolved, it'll say so, and it's solvable, but you need to solve it. You can't just, this is not one that's like, oh, it's solvable, let's just let it lie, we'll deal with it later. You need to get that squared away. So if you see something other than active on Sunbiz, you got a problem. We also have a lot of clients who have foreign qualified in other states or who have formed their entities in other states and are foreign qualified in Florida. So make sure that when you look at Sunbiz, you're also looking at any other states where you are registered. Every state does a little differently. Some are going to have a end of year filing deadline. Some are going to have a mid-year. Some are January. Some make you file annually, others not every year. But get on there, double, triple check, make sure that you have a legit entity in good standing. That's step one, right?
And make sure you know what state you're in, because a lot of times people rattle off to me like, oh, this is the name of the company. I'm like, was that formed in Florida? Yes, I run to Sunbiz, nothing. Oh, comes to find out it's in Delaware, it's in Wyoming, it's in Nevada, it's in Illinois. They thought it was converted and it wasn't. You don't know if you're in good standing if you don't even know what state you're in.
Yeah. And by the way, like we giggle, and it's one of those things that's really easy to get wrong. Like it doesn't mean you're dumb. It doesn't mean like you've got a defective team. It just is one of those things that's so small that it's easy to let it slip through the cracks.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially, we have a lot of people who have moved. So we get, especially with the real estate practice, we get a lot of people who we met maybe at a real estate closing table who are moving from Illinois, Indiana, Colorado, New York, Ohio, wherever. And they're bringing the business with them. And so they're like, ooh, I need to move the business. And sometimes that gets lost in the unpacking. And so now they live in Florida, but the business still is domiciled in Illinois, but they think they live in Florida because they meant to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're checking that out, the other thing you want to look at is, where is your registered agent? For the same reason, right? So we've had clients where, not that we advise it, but they were acting as their own registered agent, or they had somebody, not like a registered agent company, acting as their registered agent. And, they've moved and they didn't update the address, or, things of that sort, where you just want to make sure that if there is some sort of important like mail or service of process that someone's going to try to direct to you, that it's going to come to the right place. So just a quick spin through that is a good place to start. It's also a good way to take a look at whether you need to make updates to the directors and officers or managers and officers of your business who are listed. In a small, closely held business, those might not change for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden you get a little bigger and you start adding officers, or you've got more directors, and people roll in and out of those roles, but they may not right away get updated on Sunbiz. And so it's a good opportunity to take note of that and understand what updates you may need to make there. From there, right now, let's assume we've got our entity is squared away on Sunbiz and we're happy with that. We've also got these formation documents, right? And so people form entities left and right on their phones today, right? Like you can get online and you can do it on Sunbiz and put all sorts of things in there. Whether they're really what you want or not is a separate question, right? But you can form an entity without like drafting your own documents, or you can draft your own documents. And I think there are legitimate reasons for both approaches. We tend to be in the camp of, if we're building a business that is really going to run and have operations and cash coming in and out, that it's worth the money to just have a lawyer put together the right formation documents. Right. And if you step back kind of the bigger picture, the reason you build an entity, right? The reason you establish an entity, instead of just, I'm Whitney Harper, I'm selling you a thing, or I'm providing a service individually. The first reason is protection from liability, right? So if we want protection from liability, we can do a little better than what the standard Sunbiz form provides for us, right? We can add some indemnification language to that. We can do some things in those formation documents that are simple, but really foundationally important, so that if there is an issue, you, the business owner, are better protected, right? That's the whole point of the entity. So let's like not take half a step, let's take the full step in and protect you well from potential liability there.
And it's everything. I mean, I tell people all the time, the biggest detriment you can possibly have is when you say, it's just me, because that's the exact argument Morgan & Morgan, for the other people, is going to make. They're going to make an alter ego argument that says, I can't tell the difference between Whitney and Advos, so I'm not going to give you any liability protection. Where's your corporate documents? Where's your operating agreement? Where are you following it? And that, when people that, oh, I'll just grab something online. I mean, we literally see all sorts of things come in from off the street, some of which, I have to be honest with people, is really not, there's not a lot of value in even paying us to read, because I open the face of it and basic language is incorrect. We'll refer to the operating agreement as a partnership agreement, or it will have the wrong statutory reference to this LLC article in the Florida statutes. So there's some things you can see clearly on their face are wrong, that if you're just reading it, you wouldn't necessarily understand or appreciate how glaringly wrong that is, if that's not your area of expertise. So you have to be really very careful, because you can actually do harm by pulling something that is poorly drafted like that, if what your goal is liability protection.
Yeah. Well, and if we think about what are the goals of an entity, right? So liability protection for sure. Secondly, you probably are setting up this entity so that you can run a business profitably and without like a ton of distraction and litigation and like all the things, right? And third, you may be building this business with an eye toward kind of long-term big picture value, an exit, or, you know, something of that sort, where you are going to have this asset that's not just about the day-to-day operating profits, but actually is about kind of exponential value on that. And if those are your goals, then particularly if you think there might be an exit down the road, somebody else is going to pick up the sheets and look under, right? And all of the pieces along the way are going to be part of that record that they're going to see. So,
and fourth goal for tax, if you've got certain tax situations that you're trying to take advantage of, if you're not properly documented, you may jeopardize that. So
absolutely. And
I always tell people, like, I know you don't think you're going to get sued. I know you don't think that part matters. Morgan & Morgan is bigger than me. So there's obviously a lot of opportunity for these types of claims. But let's say you're right, you're insulated, nothing will ever happen to you. You at least need the tax benefits. So like, never mind me and my silly liability protection.
Yeah. Forget that I'm trying to like keep your assets with your family if something happens, right?
Yeah.
Never mind that. But the taxes matter in a big and regularly recurring way.
People believe that will happen. They don't believe necessarily that there will actually be any other liability.
No, it's true. And when I think about those things, it is really stark. And I think, Joanne, you and I see this all the time. And because we see it so often, it's obvious to us. And then I think about our clients who show up and they might form one or two entities in a lifetime. And so they're not thinking about the customizations and the different approaches that you can take to those governing documents. And when I say governing documents, I mean things like everything from your articles, right? The formation of your entity, to your bylaws or your operating agreement or shareholder agreement. Sometimes you see like a voting agreement, all kinds of things that are agreements among the owners and agreements among the board about how this entity is going to be governed. And there are a lot of different decisions you can make. And so business owner who says, well, hey, my friend who has a business had this document, I just swapped out the names. Like, they're not trying to like do the wrong thing, right? They're thinking, oh, well, he went and got a lawyer to do it, and so why shouldn't I use that? And then we walk through it together and, think through, okay, here are the decisions that have been made. And there are some things that might not be in the agreement at all. You're not going to see, right? That you won't know you're missing unless you have somebody kind of guiding you through that document. And so those are really important discussions. I think of it like a prenup, honestly.
Oh, completely.
If you've got more than one owner in a business, then you want to be very thoughtful and careful about what those governing documents have in them. And you want to make those decisions while you still like each other. Do it on the front end before there's actual money in the business, before there's actual conflict in the business.
And that makes it so much easier to talk about. Like, okay, when it comes to major decisions and how do you want to vote unanimous, and what do you want majority rule, and what dollar limit are you comfortable spending without my permission versus you? Like, where do you want to vote on spending? And that starts to also show people some true colors. I've had some clients sit down to talk about these types of provisions and then ultimately realize, like, we are not philosophically aligned to be a good fit to be business partners. And sometimes people ignore the red flag and go marching face first in. And then that's ultimately the thing that breaks them up. We had a client they were actually lawyers, and one of the lawyers was, running the business, and one was an experienced lawyer who was like, I just want to sit down at a desk and crank out work. I don't want to run the business. And when we got to voting, she wanted to vote on any expenditure over $250. Oh, and I was like, that means like stop, vote, written consent, like approval to order office supplies. Like, do you understand what?
Like, I'm taking the team out to lunch. Yeah.
I thought you didn't want to be involved in the day-to-day operations. Why do you want to hear about $250? So sometimes it's not even that people are trying to not be forthcoming about what they're concerned about, but this manifests itself through these discussions, which are much better had before everyone is married.
Well, so we have one, I'll give you the counterpoint, right? So you had that discussion on the front end, which is probably at the very least friendship saving, right?
Yes.
We have recently had a client come in where there are 3 business partners, and one of them is the kind of face of the company. And I think probably you'd think of her as the idea person, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's one who is the kind of funding source, who's just, put some money in, isn't really involved in the day-to-day or in the kind of management of the enterprise, but still, wanted to have some insight and oversight. And then the third partner was the operator and really was handling all of the financials and all those things. And, all of a sudden, face of the company visionary realizes that things have been put in front of her to sign that are like personal guarantees for debt on the business that she doesn't realize that they need. Or, hey, what's this bank account that I've never heard about? And why is it like at 0? Or why am I not able to see what the expenses were on that Amex that we just paid off? Things of that sort, right? So that was a big one where the partners on the front end did not decide, here's how we're going to share information. Here's who's going to be authorized. And they may have inadvertently made some of those decisions, right? Thinking we have faith in each other. I don't need to be the one seeing the bank account, right? So some of it's like, how much do you want to have to approve? Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, the counterpoint to that is, what do you want to have the right to know about and the right to see, and the controls around, right? Like the sharing of kind of partner power. So constraints and permissions, I think are those two like counterbalancing things that we talk a lot about, right? So that you don't end up in the situation where you're dealing with like partner theft, right? Like that's a real nasty one. And it happens, right? It happens all the time.
And the divorce from that is ugly.
It's nasty. It's real nasty. Yeah. And we also have things like financing sources who come in with equity, who want to have a lot of control. And the management team who takes in that equity thinks about the situation in the business today, right? So partner says, or financing source investor says, if you're going to increase your salaries above X, I've got to approve that. Well, X is a number that today is significantly higher than what they're making because they're in startup mode. And so everybody's like, sure, no problem. Of course, like no problem at all. Fast forward 5 years, they've got a thriving business with a couple of founders who are being paid well below market because they've got a grouchy investor on the other side who won't approve higher salaries, right? So just things of that sort where if you have somebody who's not one of the partners who can call the question and say, okay, I know that you're all thinking about this in terms of like sunshine and butterflies and business is good and life is good and we're all still friends, but my job is to play devil's advocate. Mm-hmm. What if this goes south?
When this blows up?
Yeah, right. But every business is going to find some way to go sideways at some point, right? Like, not to say you can't right the ship, but you're going to have rough patches. So let's just talk about them and make sure that we're all clear about how we want to handle them as we go through them. And those, honestly, I'm harping on this like multi-owner. You got to be clear about who's got what rights, who's got what responsibilities, how we're going to run the business, all of those things, because those are the situations that to me are so heartbreaking when it goes wrong and we haven't like decided beforehand how we were going to deal with it. There's just business owners, founders care so much, right? And it like that brings a lot of emotion and a lot of difficult stuff to bear in those situations, versus coming in and going, okay, we all talked about this and we all decided that whether we were on the high side or the low side of the issue, this was a path forward that we all could feel good about. And so I don't feel like I've been taken advantage of. I feel like I am still, like I still have some, dignity through the process and can work through it.
That's really tough too, because like you said about the friendship piece, like that starts to damage the relationship and it calls into question trust where it wouldn't have to. Even if everyone says, well, we talked about it, your recollection may not be correct. So it's like, let's just pull the book out and see what we decided. And then it's neutral.
And your recollection will not be correct. It's not even like may not, right? Like everyone's revisionist history is written with themselves as the hero, right? Like it's just true. Like nobody looks back and goes, yeah, I really have screwed this up and I was in the wrong all the way through. Like no one.
Yeah.
Right? And we're talking about it, in the framework of friends, but this happens with families too, right? Like a lot of
way worse when it's families.
Are families. And that, I mean, you want to talk about something interesting at the holidays, right? So make sure that you have those documents in place, but also make sure that you've actually worked through them with good counsel who can help you navigate it and make sure that from a tax perspective, from a governance, voting perspective, buy, sell, like how we would buy each other out if we need to exit, how will we resolve disputes, who has control to do which things, and what things require unanimity versus maybe a founder approval or whatever those things are. But really working through those, making sure that the documents you have in place are appropriate for your needs and your team. And also just like give it a read through once a year and make sure that like you remember what's in it and that you're actually doing the things that it says, right? Because that's the follow-on point, is you got to have things in place and then you have to actually do what they say.
Preach into the choir.
When people come in and they're like, well, I mean, I know the document says this, but we would never do that.
Then let's change it.
We better take it out of the document then, right? Like that needs to come right on out, because if we would never do that, then we better not write it down. That becomes you go back to Morgan and Morgan, right? Well, nice, you have these documents in place, but did you ever do the thing that it says that you're going to do? It says you're going to have an annual meeting. Have you had that meeting? Maybe once when we formed the company. That's a bad.
Or that meeting is scheduled. This meeting, especially if you have the legal Zoom docs, this meeting is every year on December 31st. Really?
Yeah.
Are you really?
I know what I'm doing on New Year's Eve, and it's not having a corporate meeting.
No. So maybe we want to pick a different day, and so that you can actually do it.
Yeah.
And those things are not harmless. That's not like, oh, it's no big deal. It's just me. Like, yes, it is a big deal. If you don't want to be treated like it's just you. Yeah.
And I mean, just so everyone who's listening is clear, right? The idea is that your entity is this, it's not just another way to say your name, right? Like it's not just Whitney Harper, also known as. It is a separate living, breathing thing. It has its own set of rules. It is like effectively a separate person. And so we've got to make sure that we keep that separate person like alive and thriving. And that's like the corporate veil. I mean, you hear it talked about in lots of different contexts. But if you want that protection, you got to take that part seriously. For sure. Okay, so be consistent. What your documents say is what you need to be doing. And then whether your documents say it or not, and I know a lot of like LLC documents won't say this, but we find best practice is to have that annual meeting, right? So probably not on December 31st, but make sure that at least once a year you are reaffirming the governance of your entity and who the officers are and any kind of major decisions that haven't already been covered with a consent or, a meeting and minutes. But the annual meeting really is important, and it's just good hygiene, right?
Mhm.
Like just good hygiene. And in a lot of companies, we have found, and we will often draft with this kind of concept, that one of the ways that works well for a buy sell, like how we would separate, how we decide the value of our company, is that the owners once a year, and more frequently if something major has changed in the business, but once a year, the owners declare a value or maybe a methodology. So they might say, in the current market, the methodology for valuation of this company is, X times EBITDA over the last 12 months, or we think the value of our firm this year as of January 1 is 3 million. And they're all agreeing then that if it comes to it, whether they are the buyer or the seller, they think that's a fair value for the whole enterprise, right? So it's a really healthy discussion. Even if it's not the mechanism you use, right? A really healthy discussion for all the partners to sit down once a year and say, what do we think the right value of this thing is today, based on what we know about business? So annual meeting is a really good, it's not exactly corporate documents until it gets documented into your consents or your minutes, and how you do it. But having the annual meeting, and then any other major kind of decisions or events in the life of the entity along the way, getting documented through consents and minutes as well, all of which get stored in, I wish I had one sitting here, the old minute book, right? So
which is something that LegalZoom will sell you, a nice fancy book with a seal and all the stuff you don't need, and an empty operating agreement with blank lines on the thing you do need.
Yes. And truly, I think best practice in today's world, whether you do it with your law firm or, in your own internal file share or whatever you do, setting up your electronic data room. And in that data room is a folder called minute books, right? Or like, minutes of meetings or whatever you want to call it. But having a place where you store approved versions, PDF it, have somebody sign it. This is the set of minutes from that meeting. And just get in the habit of, we know that the final documents are there. Not, I drafted some notes from our meeting. That's not what we mean, right? We want to talk about what did we decide? And what are the things we approved, decided, that kind of thing, and get them into an online data room. And then you don't have to worry about, that got flooded in that last hurricane, or gosh, I heard this one. I sold the desk that had that in the drawer. Like, didn't empty the drawer? Nope. That was a good one.
And all these things happen because we are not creative enough to make this stuff up.
No. It totally happens. And if you get it online, it's easy to share it with your counsel if you need to. It's easy to share it with other partners. Like, just put it in a place, let it sit there. And then when something happens that you go, oh, we need to figure out what to do, it's also easy to know for you or for someone else in the company who might need to step in for you. Easy to know where to find those documents, right? Sad, but I think an effective example. No one expects to be the business owner who gets into the horrific motorcycle accident and who was, running the business.
Yeah.
But if that happens, then there needs to be some way for someone else to step in and figure out what's what. And so having that stuff in a place where it's shared with your counsel or shared with someone else in the business, so they can access it and run with it, can be one of the most loving things you can do for your business, for your family, for the people who depend on and rely on you. And I think as business owners, we know all too well that that's not just our spouses and children, right? It's our employees, spouses and children. It's our, our broader community. It like what you've done in building a business is a big thing that's really vitally important to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so this work of kind of year-end maintenance, being thoughtful about having all those documents appropriately drafted, stored so that people can get to them, making sure that you know what they say and that you're actually like doing that. That's really, it sounds so like menial, but it is such meaningful, important work because of the effect it can have if something really does go wrong.
Yeah.
It's really important.
Or if something goes really right and you want to sell it for tons of multipliers,
Yes.
like look at the buyer who comes to look at your documents and everything is in beautiful order. It's just like having good handwriting on your homework. Like you're probably going to get the benefit of the doubt. So if there is something, it's going to strengthen your negotiating position because they're like, this thing is locked and stocked.
Yes.
Instead of rickety, and the information is less reliable and believable when it's been cobbled together and here, take this and glue this and put this together and let me lift up the mattress and look for that. Like, no, here's my stuff, push across the table.
We had a client several years ago that understood, so we call it advanced due diligence, right? We are always doing due diligence, making sure that our clients' documents are in order, they're in the data room, that they are well organized, the things like stuff that should be signed is signed, and it has all its pages and those kinds of things. And so we had a client who understood that. They were in kind of startup mode and had taken in some capital, had made some big leaps and used capital pretty quickly. And they were ready to make their next big leap, but they also had essentially run out of funds, right? So they had about 90 days of capital left. And they found a VC firm that was going to invest and reached agreement on terms on everything except the timing of the investment. So the VC firm says, yeah, I mean, I think we probably could close in 120 days or so if we can, if things move quickly. And client says, I think we can do it in 30, right? VC firm sort of looks at him like, I don't know if you understand this. Like maybe this is your first rodeo, but there's this thing called due diligence. And you're like, we're going to send you a list of documents and you're going to have to gather them and it's going to take time. And, and then we've got to review them. And there's usually some gaps in information and that kind of thing. And so like, I think it's going to take longer than you think. And our client, like we were on the call with them. So our client is like messaging us while we're on the call and says like, can we go ahead and share the data room? Sure. So client says, yeah, I don't think it's gonna be that hard. Like not our first rodeo. We've seen how this plays out. Who needs access to the data room? And you'll have it before we're off the call. And so like their data room was all ready. We give the VCs access to the data room. They go in and Joanne, to your point, everything is well organized. They get the benefit of the doubt, right? People aren't assuming like, oh, I don't know, this is probably not the right set of information. They're assuming that we've answered the questions correctly. And so they ended up closing that transaction in 45 days.
Wow.
Insane, right? 45-day closing because like the diligence was not a factor. The only thing they had to do was like agree on the specific terms of the deal. And, on the other side, when I was in-house counsel, we acquired companies where it literally was like, well, I got the signature page here and Fred's got page 2 of that contract. And like those guys who had built great businesses, unfortunately took a hit on valuation because we as the buyer had reason to be skittish. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's hugely important, not just your foundational documents, but your workforce agreements, your material contracts, right? Think about your contracts with suppliers, with customers, the agreements that you have in place with whoever it is who's building the secret sauce in your business, right? Whether it's a software developer or in-house somebody who's building your kind of process and know-how, or whatever that is, like making sure that you actually own the IP that you believe has the value in your business. All of those pieces become hugely important in showcasing the value and bolstering the value of the business you've built when you are ready to exit. So, or take investment or whatever else, right? I think there's a lot of good outcomes, not just the sad outcomes, that this can be huge for.
It's the same swing. Like it can make the bad really bad, but it also can literally increase your multiplier just by being prepared and organized and having the information available, because that is a totally different start to the negotiation, and that tone carries through.
Yes.
The entire time.
It's huge.
Now, we do have a question. Someone's asking, do you have a mastered list that you can share of documents you'd ideally keep in a data room?
I do. I don't, Joanne, can I drop a document in our chat?
Yes. And we can also put that when we do the distribution of the webinar, we can include that and send it to the attendees as well.
So we have the advanced due diligence data room categories. Oh, it looks like it's not going to let me drop off of my laptop. So I'll email it to you, Joanne, and then you can circulate. And hi, Rochelle. We organize our data rooms all the same way so that it's, consistent across clients. And so what you'll see in this document is essentially 7 categories and just kind of brief descriptions of the types of things that we would put in each category of documents. You certainly, like if you Google around or, and we've got more detailed due diligence request lists, and you certainly can dive into that. But I think if you take this 1-page document and go, okay, just like end of year brainstorm, what kinds of things have I done this year that would fall into these categories? Do I have those saved in some place where it's easy to find them and know that I've got them all together? This is a really kind of quick way to just go, oh yeah, okay, I've got them all together, right? And then you might reach out to your lawyer and say, hey, I pulled all these documents together. Can I engage you to just run through them and issue them, right? Do I have any major gaps that I need to be concerned with? Right? This doesn't have to be the business owner's burden to go look through all of it, right? You can certainly engage counsel or, a CPA, various other kind of professionals who can come in and help you just understand, like, are you on good footing or are you not?
Sure.
Yeah. And then if you're not,
also identify any other things that you might need in terms of like insurance. If you've got buy sell provision and you need an insurance policy for that, then you've also got people that can point you to the direction of an insurance agent that can do that if you don't already have one. But a lot of times those things, you have had a good lawyer and they've provided you these things, but then if they're not done, they're still not helpful. So it's like having a trust and not funding it.
Yes.
LLC and not putting the property in it. Like
we find that happens a lot, right? That the traditional model of professional services relies on the client to go kind of that last mile. And anybody's in logistics, like the last mile is always the most difficult, right? And so when we as lawyers draft a document for someone, I mean, it's almost like if a CPA said, here's your tax return, and like, now you need to send in the cash and the, the return itself to the IRS, and didn't circle back and go, hey, did you do that? Right? Like it's that last little step, but if that step's the only part that actually matters, right? The IRS does not care that I had someone draft a tax return. The IRS really only cares that I like got it to them and paid them the cash, right? So same thing here, making sure that like the documents get implemented and that things like get all the way to signed and filed is hugely important.
Do you have any preference about, or do you have any documents that you prefer to have originals, or do you find that your corporate documents, you're comfortable with everything being scanned? Is there anything you feel like you need an original of? We
are big believers in e-sign. It has made that last mile so much easier on everyone. So we build into our documents e-sign authorizations, just so there's no doubt that everyone understands and accepts an e-signature. And we do it through an e-sign platform that confirms identity using kind of an email confirmation. So it's a little more secure and reliable. But, real estate, I think there's probably some stuff in real estate that would not be okay without an ink signature. We don't really do a lot of real estate. So from our perspective, like we're not doing estates and trusts, and we're not doing real estate.
Just in the nature of the corporate documentation, I'm with you. I don't really feel like there's any original. In terms of real estate, the only thing I would say keep an original of is if you are the lender to anyone for anything, I want the original promissory note in my hands in a safety deposit box. That without that, we have some pretty serious hills to overcome that are unnecessary to fight about. It's not that that can't be done, but then it's done in court and it just costs more. So that's really the only thing with respect to real estate that I can even think of. Even your warranty deed, once it's in the public record, it's completely unnecessary to even keep, let alone an original. So
I was just like doing my year-end shredding at home and was like,
dump the deed. Don't dump your title policy, but dump your deed.
Like everything's scanned. Do I really need this paper?
No, go ahead and get rid of it.
Love that. That's great. Yeah.
This is quite the recap. I'm anxious to see your list.
Well, we've tried to keep it to one page. And it's broader than just the corporate docs, right? It's really gets into what I think of as kind of big picture corporate documentation, right? All the things that evidence the business you're doing. And, circling back to the kind of the beginning of our conversation, year-end is a great time to do it. If there are, if you look at it and you go, my corporate documents, my governing documents are in good shape, but it turns out I don't have non-competes with my key employees, and I would be devastated if they left and set up a shop next door doing the same thing. Year-end, kind of new year is I don't know why it works, right? Psychology is a wonderful thing. But hey guys, new year, it's time to update our employment documents. Like, great time. It's a great excuse to make that happen.
It feels a little less suspicious. Like, it's June 15th. Why do you want me to sign this?
Right.
Like, getting ready to fire me? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Do you have any objection to any of the employment contracts being stored digitally and not have the originals?
No, I really don't. I mean, you want to be sure that they actually are signed. Right? So sometimes we'll see things where it's like, someone typed in a name and didn't actually sign on the line, or we had someone recently who wanted us to kind of write a cease and desist demand letter post-employment for someone who they are certain signed a non-compete, but all we have seen so far is a Word document, right? So we know he didn't sign the Word doc. So let's like just getting yourself to that stage of, okay, whatever I've got saved is the version that the person actually signed, whether they signed it electronically or in ink or whatever. You know, make sure that you have it, and a scan of the signature, we've not had a problem with in that regard.
Okay, good.
It's just, you know, I think the important thing is like, have it signed.
Is it there?
Right.
Actually finish the job.
Well, and
it's everything. It's not just the corporate docs. Like I said, people form
all
LLCs to put their rental properties in and then never quit claim the property over to the LLC. So it's with anything, it's human nature.
It absolutely is. And it's often not that they didn't actually do 90% of the work, right? It's just that last little bit.
Oh yeah, the heavy lifting's definitely done. So perfect. Yeah. Anything else? Any parting words and final wisdom for us?
Oh my, let's see.
I mean, it is year end.
Oh yeah, so I see a question from Jamal. Is this what you offer in services, all this and the last mile? I think I would say resoundingly yes.
She's the queen of the last mile.
Well, and Joanne's firm and ours, I mean, I think the Koontz group and the Advos team, this is part of why we love working together, right? Is that we are very much realists in kind of the practicality of our thinking, right? Like let's not have our clients go spend money for something that actually doesn't like get the result they want. Mm-hmm. And so when you're focused on the result and the deliverable and what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve, that means that your service necessarily does take the thing from the initial question of, should we even do this thing, all the way through to, let's make sure it's actually effective at the result that you wanted. And so, yeah, that is, I think, my favorite thing about the alignment of thinking with the Koontz team is really making sure that it achieves the desired result, and that we're delivering the value that our clients and our team expect us to.
And it's easy, especially with what we do. Like if you don't have a good team working together, it's easy for the lawyers to tell you to do something for tax, and then they never see the CPA. And then the lawyer falls off the map and is like, well, I told you to do that. When you work with us, the two firms, like we are making sure that like those loose ends are getting tightened up, because it's still on your list. Like I told you to do that. And in our unique case, like the tax is handled by me or Marina. So it's easy. It's hard to outrun us because we're the ones doing it. But still, we work lots of times like with you with employment or IT or intellectual property and stuff like that, to say, you know, hey, I don't know the answer, but you need to go get the answer. And I'm not going to let you off the hook until you go get that. Like we're going to keep talking about why we need to get that solved.
Yeah. And that's, you know, I see.
Or we're going to table it.
About sort of how do we know, like, how do you know what's needed? Right. And I think in all of our combined practice areas, that's been really a valuable part of the offering that almost is unsung, right? Like I know your team thinks of it this way too. But like, we don't want to dive into solving a problem before we understand what the problem is and whether that problem is the right problem to address. And we also understand that we are the experts in some aspects of that. And then we need to be able to help the client have the information they need to make a decision, right? It's not our decision to make. Mm-hmm. And so that's really, I think, like whether it's talking through how to structure the real estate deal, what we want to do with your taxes, what the structure should be for entities, or you know, governing documents, or any of those things, being able to lay out for the business owner, here are the risks, here are the benefits, here are your options. Yep. Now,
and that also helps prioritize, because you can't frankly put your attention to everything at once when you're still running the business. Most of our clients are still very involved in the day-to-day operations and management of the company. So you can't be off in operating agreement la land for 6 months and then ignoring the business. Yeah. So when we can do all that and get it on the table, we can help analyze and prioritize. Like, this is on fire. We have to do this. And this is something it'd be great if we did in the next year. And sometimes we have clients who are like, nope, I want to clear the deck, get all this out of the way so I can get it on the shelf and I don't want to think about it again for 2 years. And some people are like, I need bite sizes and I want to do one thing per quarter or per year or whatever the schedule is. But that way they know how much they've accomplished too. And they can look back and be like, wow, when we started, we had nothing. And now we have 10 things done. We still have 50 more to do, or 5, or whatever the number is. But it also gives you that kind of Dave Ramsey sense of accomplishment, as you can see what you've knocked out. It's not just how far you have to go, but how far you've come.
Yeah. And so often, I mean, I know for myself as a business owner, right? If I know that I've got the thing on the list, like I can sort of file it as it will be handled.
Yeah.
But I know it's not done yet, but I know it's on the list. I know I've got a team, I've got, counsel or tax partner or whoever who's going to help me make sure that it happens. And then it's happening on a schedule and in a use of resources, right? Like can't forget the cost end of it.
Yeah.
Right. That I've budgeted for it well, like everything's aligned to something that I'm comfortable with. And now we can go forward. Right. And I don't have to be
also the way we do that in our land is we have parking lots. So we have a short-term parking lot that is stuff we'd like to address in the next 12 months. Mm-hmm. And then we have kind of the 1 year out parking lot. And then we have the 3 to 5 year parking lot. This is lofty and I want another building, or I want, something big but I still want it in our face so we don't lose track of it, so that we can, when we map, we're kind of mapping in that general direction.
Yep.
And sometimes things go from the short-term parking lot. I thought I was doing that next quarter to, well, we changed something else and now that makes this obsolete, unnecessary, or not urgent. And so it gets moved to a different parking lot. The other thing that we do that I would encourage people to at least consider trying is we keep a discarded ideas list. So if something gets bumped off the parking lot and we say, you know what, I was going to write a dress code, and then COVID happens and you realize that doesn't matter anymore. Then instead of deleting it, we move it to the discarded ideas and we periodically review that. Is there anything we decided against that we should reconsider? Or it also, because your memory is not accurate, it also lets you know, yeah, we did think of that and we decided not to do it. So just something else.
Great. That is really good. We have similar concepts, right? Not surprisingly. And honestly, the idea list is, so in our world, it's an idea list or a bucket, idea bucket, but that list is so helpful. And often you see the same thing come into the idea list 3 or 4 times under different names, right? And then you go, all right, well,
maybe I should do that.
We either need to have a discussion and really put it to bed and really decide not to, or we need to get that on the list and just quit pinging ourselves about it.
Exactly. It does keep you honest. That's for sure.
It does. And having a team internally and externally that is aligned to and understands that approach, right? That can kind of think through, it doesn't all have to happen today. The sky is not falling on all fronts, right? What is urgent? What is really important? What's going to build real value if we do it now versus what can wait? What may or may not be something we want to do, but we want to keep it on the list. Mm-hmm. It's such a valuable approach. It really is.
This has once again been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for all of that you've shared with us throughout the year. It's been lovely. I feel like our firm has grown by working with you, and I feel like we have provided more comprehensive service to our clients. So I appreciate the loose partnership or
that's outstanding
opportunity to to even just have a sounding board. I know there's lots of times where Jackie calls and says, hey, I'm noodling this and what do you think? And it's really nice to have
I love that
someone like you and your team to just bounce ideas off of. So it's been wonderful. And since it is the wrap up of the year, we are gladly accepting emails from people to provide topics that you'd like to hear about. We want to make sure that we continue to provide content that's relevant to you and your business and tax and real estate and even things we don't cover. We occasionally have people from outside our practice area completely because they're still we have insurance people, we're estate planning people. We want to make sure that we, provide all of the areas of information that you need, even if we're not the experts in them. So if you have any questions and you want to reach out, Whitney, you can drop your contact details in the chat if you like. And we'll also have her information available with the recording as well. So looking forward to hearing from you guys on any topics that you might be interested in hearing. And thank you so much. It has been a much better year to not have to talk about PPP and get to talk about these kind of topics on our webinars. We hope that you found them helpful, and we look very forward to the new year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Have a good one, everybody.